When we think of the phrase, "a specter is haunting Europe," our brains immediately go to 1848, to Karl Marx, the Industrial Revolution, and grainy photos of Victorian factories. But what if I told you that a full-scale, state-sponsored communist revolution happened over 1,300 years before the Communist Manifesto was even a rough draft? And it didn't happen in Europe. It happened in ancient Persia. Meet Mazdak, a Zoroastrian priest who looked at the absolute mega-wealth of the Sasanian elite and decided that private property wasn't just a social problem. It was a spiritual sin. This is the story of how an ancient empire played with radical left-wing ideology and the wild political drama that followed. Before we dive into why Mazdak's ideas caught fire, let's take a look at the Sasanian Empire in the late 5th century. It was a hyper-stratified feudal society. You had the royal family, the powerful noble clans who owned all the land, and the orthodox Zoroastrian priesthood who kept everyone in check. If you were a peasant, your life consisted of farming land you didn't own, paying exorbitant taxes, and watching the aristocracy live in unimaginable luxury. Then comes Mazdak. His core philosophy was this. Mazdak was a high-ranking priest, but he started preaching a wildly heterodox version of Zoroastrianism. He argued that God had placed all resources on earth for human beings to share equally. According to Mazdak, things like greed, hatred, and jealousy weren't just random human flaws. They were spiritual evils born directly out of private property and the unequal distribution of wealth. His solution? Abolish the monopolies of the rich, redistribute the land, and share everything. Unsurprisingly, the peasants absolutely love this. The nobility, not so much. Now, usually this is the part of ancient history where the radical prophet gets immediately executed by the king for treason. But this is where the story gets incredibly weird. Enter King Kavad I. Kavad had just taken the throne, and he had a massive problem. The traditional nobility and the orthodox clergy had gotten so powerful that they were essentially treating the king like a puppet. Kavad wanted to break their stranglehold on the empire. So he looked at Mazdak's massive, angry, lower-class movement and thought, I can use this. In a spectacular display of the enemy of my enemy as my useful political tool, King Kavad I officially gave Mazdakism royal backing. With the literal king of kings on their side, the Mazdakites went to work. This wasn't just a protest. It was a state-sanctioned overturning of society. They opened up the royal and aristocratic granaries to feed the starving public. They began massive wealth redistribution programs, seizing lands from the mega-rich noble families and carving them up for the peasantry. They even attacked the rigid social laws surrounding marriages, which the elite used to concentrate wealth through arranged dynasties. For a brief chaotic window in the early 6th century, Persia was operating on a proto-socialist framework. But you can only push a feudal aristocracy so far before they strike back. The nobility decided they'd finally seen enough. In 496 AD, they staged a brutal coup, deposed King Kavad, and threw him into the infamous Castle of Oblivion, a maximum security political prison. But Kavad escaped, fled to a neighboring nomadic empire, raised an army, and marched back to reclaim his throne. When Kavad got back, his political calculation changed. He realized that playing with radical ideology was a double-edged sword. He'd used the Mazdakites to weaken the nobles, but now the movement was too radical, too destabilizing, and threatened the monarchy itself. Kavad distanced himself from the movement, leaving the final bloody cleanup to his son and crown prince, Khosrow. In 524 AD, the state turned on the revolutionaries. Khosrow staged a massive trap, inviting Mazdak and his top leaders to a royal banquet under the guise of peace. Instead, they were seized and brutally executed. According to historical lore, Mazdak was buried upside down in a garden with only his feet sticking out, as a warning to anyone else who dared dream of a classless society. Khosrow went on to become one of Persia's greatest kings, remembered by history as Anushirvan, or the Immortal Soul. But his centralized reforms were only possible because Mazdak's revolution had completely leveled the old nobility for him. History loves to tell us that radical left-wing ideas are a uniquely modern phenomenon, a byproduct of industrial factories and European theorists. But Mazdak proves that as long as there has been massive inequality, there have been people willing to burn the system down to fix it. The Sasanian elite thought they could use radical ideas as a weapon in a palace game. In the end, they just proved that when the state plays with fire, it's always the people at the bottom who get burned.